Hey friends, welcome back. My name is Anna, aka Brookwillow, and today I have a jam-packed knitting podcast for you. It seems that I had a lot of WIPS on the needles, all nearing the end of being completed, and so I have 3 finished objects to show you today, quite a few WIPS, and I do have yarn to show that I have plans to cast on very soon. But let's start out with what I'm wearing because it is 2 finished objects that I have on here. And the first one that I want to show you is this bandana that I'm wearing. And this is a self-drafted bandana that I just knit up pretty quickly here. This is using Bluesky Fibers Techno yarn, and I've talked about this in the past. I am a Bluesky maker. I was a Bluesky maker for 2024, and I am again for 2025. And what that means is they send me yarn to make a few projects throughout the year. This year, I chose to knit with the Techno yarn because it was something that I really wanted to try out. The fiber content of this yarn is 68% baby alpaca, 22% silk, and 10% extra fine merino. It comes in 50 gram skeins, so it was only 100 grams that I used to knit up this bandana with like a tiny bit left over. It's considered a light chunky weight yarn, but I think it can be pretty adaptable to knit a project in bulky weight or even an Aran or worsted weight. The color of this yellow yarn is Mellow, which kind of makes sense because it is a little bit of a mellow yellow. And I've been in such a yellow mood these past couple months. You'll see with my next finished object as well. But yeah, really love this yarn. I love how much it drapes. You can see how it just drapes right over my hand. And I think it makes for a very nice bandana to just have draped around. I can tie it if I want to. I'm even playing with the idea of maybe wearing it kind of like this, like a little hood. I think this would be a really cute option to go out in as well. And it's actually this style that kind of inspired me to create this pattern. I think I found something similar from a ready-to-wear brand, and obviously I'm like, I can knit that. And it just turned out that I had this yellow yarn left over. It took 2 skeins. Originally, I was going to knit it into this sweater that I made, which I'll talk about next. But the colors just didn't work out, and I'm really happy that I now have a bandana that I can layer with this sweater. It took me a few tries to get to this iteration of the bandana. I think originally my plan was to cast on at the point and just increase on both sides, but I didn't like the way that the stockinette stitch ran up and down. I kind of wanted it to run sideways because it gave it more stretch and ability to tie it how I want it to. So then I ripped it out and I cast on. So the top part was straight and I just made the increases on one side and then decreases after I knit through that first skein. And as we know, stockinette stitch flat tends to curl in quite a bit. It curls in a tiny bit on this particular one, but not too bad. I did create a little edging stitch on the sides here that help prevent it from curling in. So overall, I am very pleased with how this particular project turned out. I know I'm going to get a ton of wear out of it. I have another knit bandana that I made a couple years ago that I wear all the time, so I'm really happy to be adding on another one to my wardrobe. I am thinking about making a pattern tutorial. You may have seen that I just put out a pattern tutorial last week, and I kind of want to put out one for this bandana as well. I'm thinking of making a cotton summer version of this, and that's probably what I'll use to record the tutorial. So if you are interested in a pattern for this bandana, let me know, and I certainly will create one. Now, of course, we must talk about this sweater that I'm wearing underneath. I showed off this sweater in my last knitting podcast. It's also made using Bluesky fiber. And I talked through my color decisions in my last podcast, so I'm not going to really go into that again. But I will say that I love this sweater. It is the Norma by My Favorite Things Knitwear. This is the raglan version of the Norma. I did see that she has since put out a drop shoulder version, but I personally like this one better than the other one, so I'm happy that I made this version of it. I'm excited because my friend Casey from Young Folk Knits is also knitting this sweater in a beautiful version with like a dark chocolate brown and a light blue and a cream, and I'm so obsessed with her color combination. We decided to do kind of like a mini cal in a way and work on our sweaters at the exact same time. And yeah, eventually we will both have the same sweater that we can wear together. I knit a size XL, which gave me about 12 inches of positive ease. Normally, my sweet spot is 10 inches of positive ease, but since this yarn is super drapey, I feel like it doesn't give it such a boxy fit. It's a lot more flowy and just kind of lays a bit nicer against my body. And I think it's the perfect size. This is the coziest sweater easily that I have ever made for myself. I think it's a combination of the shape of the sweater and just, again, how oversized it is, and in combination with the yarn that I used. This is such a soft yarn and it's not itchy at all. I'm sure it's going to pill a lot, but I don't care. I'll depill it. I have had a hard time even taking this garment off. I feel like I just really have good things to say about it. Originally, when I blocked it, I did feel like the sleeves were a bit long, but as I've worn it all week pretty much, it's shrunk up a little bit to not be so annoying. I don't like it when my sleeves go over my hand. I feel like they just get in the way of everything, but this is like a really good length for them. I definitely can see myself making this sweater again, just without any of the color work, because I think it's just a really nice shape. And like I've been kind of talking about this year a bit, I need to create more solid color garments for my wardrobe, just because obviously they're easier to wear a lot more. So I definitely can envision myself making this again without the stripes, just for the shape and the style of it. I really am pleased with how it turned out. And I should also mention, I really like this more of a mock turtleneck. Sometimes the turtlenecks that I've made in the past, if they fold over, they just get a little obtrusive in or around my neck, and this is just a really nice length for a turtleneck. So I'm really happy with how that turned out as well. I have another finished object that I actually haven't shown on here probably since this summer, I think. Like I mentioned, have had a lot of garments on the needles, and usually I really only like to have one, maybe two WIPS that are garments at the same time, because then I get easily overwhelmed. And I really want to start casting on some other projects, but I needed to finish up some previous projects that are taking up my needles and the cords that I have available, but also kind of my brain space as well. It's nice to have somewhat of a clean slate before I start casting on new garments, especially for a new season coming up like the springtime. So the sweater that I finished is the Mara's sweater by Ravelry. You may remember this. Like I said, I started working on this, I think, last spring. I really wanted a jacket style cardigan, and that's what I made. Some things I really do like about this cardigan is, first of all, the texture. It has a waffle knit texture, and I think that just adds a really nice detail to this garment. I'm also happy with the color that I paired with these buttons. It never was my intention to put these buttons on this sweater, but I think it looks really nice with the yellow. And you may see that I have a little bit of a cream rolled edge on the sleeve that I think ties in the button as well. And this was kind of a happy accident. The pattern calls for the sleeve to be folded in and sewn down to match the edge at the bottom here. I ran out of this yellow yarn and I couldn't get more because it's yarn that I naturally dyed myself. And I know I wouldn't have been able to match it up to what I originally dyed with it. So I used a little bit of this yarn to finish up the sleeves. I knit them 2 at a time because I knew I was going to run out of yarn and I wanted it to be the same length for the sleeves. And when it created this little rolled edge and the fact that it matched the buttons, I thought it was a cute little detail that I actually decided to keep on the garment. Now, I am still unsure of what I think about this collar. It rolls in a little bit, but not too terribly, but to me, it looks a little bit unpolished. I will say on the original sample that the designer made, that collar looks very nice and part of the reason why I wanted to knit this. But my collar just, I don't know, there's something about it. I think it just looks a little dinky maybe. And I'm kind of playing with the idea of creating this edge along the collar as well, also to tie the two a bit more together. Let me know what you think about that idea. I don't know if it's gonna look too clownish or like weird, but I'm gonna try it and see how it looks. I can always rip it back out if I need to, but yeah, I'm just gonna pick up and knit those stitches around the collar here and see if it kind of helps polish up the garment a little bit more together. Overall, I really do like the fit of this. This is also a more oversized garment. I would say it probably gives me about 10 inches of positive ease. And I don't hate that the sleeves are a bit short. I would consider them to be more of a bracelet length. And I'm realizing that I really do like a bracelet length sleeve because I tend to push my sleeves back anyways. And so it's nice to not have to push my sleeves back all day long. So I think this will be really nice, especially in the springtime when it's not quite so cold, where I need to be fully covered up. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the sweater pattern. And like I mentioned, I naturally dyed this yarn myself using, I think it was just Eupatorium, I think is the plant that I use to dye this with. I bought the dye pigments from Mowry, which is a Canadian company, and they also give you directions on how to naturally dye yarn as well if you're ever interested in trying that out for yourself. I do think I need to go in and tweak the buttonholes a little bit though. That is, I think, one more thing that I don't totally love. I can't wear this garment open. I feel like the buttonholes just look a little sloppy to me. And I even tried going in with some embroidery thread to kind of clean it up, but it almost looked worse that way. So this is going to be a garment that I really can only wear buttoned up. unless I find other ways to make it look cute. But I at least need to make the buttonhole a little bit smaller because I found that the buttons aren't quite big enough for the holes, so it just kind of opens up on itself when I don't want it to. And yeah, that'll just be another easy fix for it. I think once I just add onto the collar and fix the buttonholes, I'm gonna be just even more happy with this overall garment. Keeping on theme of working on somewhat older WIPs, I have picked up the Tessellated cardigan that I cast on this fall. This is a slow going knit because of this mosaic knit pattern. It just really condenses the fabric down, so it takes, I feel like, twice as long to knit anything on this garment. But I have reached the point where I could split for sleeves for the cropped version. However, I have found that, so I knit the pullover version of this in the cropped version, and it's just a little too cropped for what I want it to be. I am realizing that I don't really like cropped garments. I want them to be a little bit longer and baggier and oversized. So I'm going to knit the full length version, which means I have about 4 more inches to knit on this, but I am going on a trip next weekend and I'm planning to really only bring my older WIPs, so I'm hoping to get quite a bit more done on this particular garment. But yeah, let's just look at that fabric because I'm just really in love with how this is turning out. I am using Sonder Yarn Co. Sunday Morning Luxe Sport for the main yarn, and this is in the color Full English. And then for the fuzzy yarn that's called for, I'm also using Sonder Yarn Co. Halo, and this color is Horsetail. I think it's really pretty. And then for the color changing yarn, I'm using my own spindle spun yarn. And I think the 3 colors together just create a really unique looking fabric. And I think this is going to be a really nice garment to wear in the fall. I don't anticipate myself completing this in time to wear it for the rest of this season because I have a lot that I want to make. But I'm really hoping to have this for the fall, and the colors will just be nice fall colors that will make me just extra excited to wear it then. I've also made quite a bit of progress on the Aureliano sweater by Claudia Quintinella from her newest book, Memory Lane. And here is where we're at. I am almost done with the first sleeve. I would say I'm a little over halfway. And then, of course, I just have the second sleeve to work on. I have been re-energized to really kind of keep going on this particular sweater. I think because I'm just so close to finishing, so I may as well just put a lot of time and effort into it. But I'm also just having a really great time knitting on this sweater. The color work is very easy to memorize. I'll pull it up close here for you. You can probably guess it's just pretty simple color work chart. You're only using 2 colors at most at a time, so it's pretty easy to manage the yarn. And the other thing that I really like about this is the fact that there's no decreases for the sleeve. I don't know what it is, but when there's decreasing on the sleeve, I find it really annoying to knit the sleeves because it's never really fully mindless knitting. You always have to really pay attention to what row you're on, how many decreases you've made so far. I do keep track with stitch markers when I'm doing it, but like I said, it's never fully mindless knitting. But with these, it is, and I think there's just like a quick decrease at the end of the sleeve and then it's the ribbing. So I am really enjoying working on this. And since it's all mohair, it's somewhat a lighter weight fabric. So I think this would be a really nice sweater that I can still get away with wearing in the spring when it starts to warm up a little bit here. But yeah, I'm really hoping to have this sweater completed maybe by the next time I post a knitting podcast, so I can show you the final product. I have one more WIP to show you, and it is one that I showed in the last episode, but quickly I want to show you this lovely bag that it's stored in. You're probably seeing a ton of these bags right now. I feel like it's this redesigned brand, and I think they just started making project bags. And yeah, full disclosure, I did buy this with my own money from my local yarn shop. They didn't send it to me or anything because I just freaking love this bag. And it's made out of leather. I love the smell of leather, and I just love the material of leather as well. But the coolest part about this bag is how compact the bag itself is, but when you zip it opens up very large. So I'll go ahead and open it up and show you how big it opens up too. And so this has kind of become my designated sock project bag because I feel like it holds the sock material in the project over here, and then I have my interchangeable, no they're not, my double pointed Luca needles, just the whole set I guess in here, and then I keep my notions and whatnot, so it creates a really nice travel bag. I did recently get these Luca double pointed knitting needles because, let me know if this has happened to you, but like a couple months ago, I bought the Knit Pro Carbons double pointed needles, and I really love the integrity of these needles. I like that I can use metal needles, but it's not too slippery because this part right here is pretty grippy. But the issue that I'm having with these particular needles is they have been giving me like micro splinters. I don't know if you've ever touched insulation before with your bare hands or anything with fiberglass in it. I've done that a few too many times when I should have been wearing gloves, but it gives me the same splintery feeling as fiberglass does, and it makes my hands super itchy, and it's just the weirdest thing. And I tried searching online to see if anybody else was having this issue at all, and I never saw anything, but I would take a few days off from knitting on this, and then I would start knitting on it again, and I would immediately feel the itchy fiberglass feeling of my fingers. So I had to get a new set because as much as I loved working on these, I just don't want to have micro splinters. So I decided to get a small set of the Luca Indigo, and I think these are so beautiful. I've been in such a blue color mood lately. Like everything I want is kind of in this blue color. But yeah, so I think these are really pretty. They range from US 0 and they go all the way up to a US 5. So it's a perfect set for knitting socks. I've discovered last year that I really prefer knitting socks on double pointed needles, and so that's kind of why I've been purchasing these double pointed needle sets lately. The only qualm I have about this particular set is I know it's only a matter of time that I'm going to snap one of these. They are very flexible since they're made out of wood as opposed to carbon, and so I just have to be a lot more gentle with how I'm knitting, which honestly is probably a blessing in disguise because I'm a very tight knitter naturally, and this will kind of help me loosen up a little bit. But let's talk about the project that I have inside of this bag. And like I said, it was one that I started talking about and briefly showed in the last knitting podcast, and they're just some self-drafted socks that I'm making using an elongated herringbone stitch. I wonder if you can see that okay. My light, there we go. I did get pretty far with knitting this. I knit the whole leg and the heel and then tried it on and they were way too small. So I had to rip it out and just add one more repeat to the sock. And now I think it's going to be a perfect fit. And I also just tweaked a couple of spots to make it a cleaner transition from the contrast color to the main color. So it was nice that it kind of forced me to go back and readjust the pattern a little bit to make the socks even better. And so yeah, I'm having a really good time knitting on this. I love the yarn that I'm using. Talked about this in the last episode. This is from January's Sock Squad from Farmer's Daughters Fibers, and I just thought this stitch pattern is a really cool stitch pattern to show off a color changing yarn like this. But yeah, I am also thinking maybe of making another pattern tutorial for these socks because they are relatively easy and it's only a 2-row repeat for the pattern. So I think it'd be pretty easy to make a tutorial for these socks. I don't know what it is. I'm just in a tutorial mode. I have designed like a couple patterns in the past, but I don't have like the organizational skills or the motivation to really put together a whole testing period, and I don't love to like put it out on a document. I think this is just a way to put patterns out there in a different format than just strictly a hard copy. But I have, for my last knitting pattern, I did put written instructions in the description box below, and I would do that if I did a tutorial for these socks and this bandana too. That's the last WIP that I have to show that I've been working on, but I do have a lot of projects queued up, ready to go for future patterns. So I'll go ahead and talk about those next. This next pattern is one that I've been waiting to cast on until I finish this bandana. I was discussing this with my friend Elena, and I was telling her, I'm like, I have so many projects on the needles, but I really want to cast on these new projects. And she was like, well, why don't you finish that bandana first and then cast on the hat? And I'm like, yeah, I think that's a good plan. So that's what I'm going to do. And so I'm going to make the weekend hat by Hiromi Nagasawa. And this was another kind of mini cal that I was doing with Casey, and we were inspired by Marlene from Marlene Makes. She made a beautiful version of this hat as well. And yeah, I really want one for myself, and I envisioned having this particular hat in like an indigo blue color. I originally really tried getting a skein of yarn from Woolly Mammoth's drop. She had indigo yarn and it sold out within seconds, and so I tried searching for something similar and I landed on this yarn here that I have caked up. I bought this from the Yarnery, which is located in St. Paul. My friend Elena and I have been meeting up a lot lately to knit at a coffee shop, and we always talk ourselves into going to the yarn shop after, so I always feel like I have to buy something when I go. You know the whole drill. But anyways, so that's where I bought this particular yarn, and it is John Arbin Textiles Knit by Numbers. I have been wanting to knit with John Arbin Textiles for a very long time. It's a brand that I think they make really cool looking yarn, and I wanted to experience knitting it myself. So that's what I am using, and the color is, I think it's just KBN 80 is the color name for this. But yeah, this is like a very vibrant color blue that I don't really have anything of in my wardrobe. And I just thought it'd be really cool to pair this hat with like really neutral colors or even like a dark brown. I just really like the idea of the pop of color up on my head, but neutral all down below. I think that's like a really cool look. And I'm really excited to have a cable hat as well. I've never knit a cable knit hat for myself. All of the hats that I've made have been really basic, double folded brims with some variation of a rib knit. And it'll be nice to just kind of switch it up and have a hat with some texture in it. So this is definitely what I'm going to be casting on next. And I do have 3 other projects that I have queued up to cast on as well. So I think the next likely pattern that I will cast on is using more of the natural dyed yarn that I did about 2 years ago. I did 4 total colors. So I used up all of the yellow yarn on that Mara's sweater that I showed earlier. And then I'm going to next use these 2 colors as well. I even talked about using these together 2 years ago when I dyed up this yarn in podcast, and it's just taken a really long time to finally do it. And then I thought I was going to use it for maybe something else, and I've kind of come back to the original idea that I wanted to knit something kind of stripy but on the reverse side, and I knit up a swatch. So I'll show you the swatch. Here's the front side of it. I just tried out 2 different versions of stripes. This was the original one that I did, but it's just like a 1 by 1 stripe repeat, and it created too much of a chevron look to it. So then I tried out a 2 by 2 stripe repeat, and that gives it more of a defined line. But I don't really love the harshness of stripes. I don't know why. I just don't. I like it when they're a bit more blended, kind of like this. So I'm actually really loving the reverse side of the fabric, and definitely in this 2 by 2 section, I think it just softens the stripes up. The pattern I'm going to knit with this yarn is the Highline Henley pattern by Tori Yu. I have been very intrigued with knitting a little henley lightweight sweater that kind of is a sweatshirty feel like this, just super casual, easy to throw on, maybe a little more lightweight that I can wear in the spring over like a t-shirt or something. And I came upon her pattern and really liked the look of it, and she already created it using a 2 by 2 stripe, but I'm just going to modify it and have the reverse side be the outside of it. So I'll probably end up, depending on how it's constructed, knitting it inside out in the round, or if there's parts that are knit flat, it'll obviously be easier to adapt it to the pattern. So that's what I'm planning on making with this. I think I'm going to use the lighter color here for the ribbing edges and like the henley portion. And I'm kind of thinking of doing just like a wooden button. I think would look really nice with this. So that's probably the next garment that I'll be casting on. Actually, that might not be true, because I just remembered that I have other yarn that is Bluesky fiber that I kind of have an end date of having it completed by April. So I'm going to show you that one next. It's funny because as I pulled the yarn out that I'm using for this next project, it's almost the same color. It's like exactly the same color as what I'm using in the Highline Henley. So I'm really in a mood for this rusty kind of orangey red color apparently, and I'm just going with it. So let's talk about this Bluesky yarn that I'm using. This is their Woolstock Light, which is a fingering weight yarn, and it is 100% Highland wool. And the colorway for this is Rusted Roof, which I think is a very appropriate name for this color. And I envisioned just another very lightweight sweater with cool texture on it for spring. And I landed on the Vierna pattern by Fabian Gassman, which is in one of the Lane's seasonal magazines or whatever you want to call it. I forget which season and year it's from, but it's a sweater that I have loved ever since I first saw it. And again, I want to continue trying to knit patterns out of the hard copy books inspired off of the knit along that I was hosting, the Book Club Cal last year. And yeah, I just want to continue to knit more patterns out of books. So that's what I'm going to use, and that's the pattern that I'm going to make with it. So maybe this will be the first thing that I cast on. I don't know. I don't want this to get pushed off for another 2 years, and I feel like that's the track I'm on, especially because of how similar these colors will be together, but they'll make very different projects. One's more of a color work and one's more focused on texture. So those are my sweater plans, and I actually do have more yarn for another sweater plan. I just finished plying up the last bits of a spinning project that I started this summer, which is using Onair O'Care's spinning fiber. They make very beautiful bats of fiber along with the yarn that they dye seasonally and update. And I got 3 different colors last year and started spinning up a sweater quantity of it. And like I said, I just finished plying it up this morning. And so I need to, bathe the yarn, thwack it, and let it all dry out. But I spun up so much yarn. I'm going to pull this all together here so you can see just how much I spun up. I really do believe I'm going to have more than enough for a sweater and maybe enough to cast on something to go with the sweater. But here is all the yarn that I spun up for it. It's quite a bit. And I spun this woolen. It was the first time I did a woolen spun on a wheel, and I am just in love with how it turned out. It's a 3-ply, and it came out to be like an Aran weight to chunky weight yarn. So very excited to knit with this. And the pattern that I am going to use it for is the Harabi cardigan by Agio Knits. This is a cardigan that I've been so in love with ever since I first saw it. I really just love these textured cable knit type cardigans. I'm seeing a lot of designers create patterns like this, and I decided to knit Agio's version of it because it fits the yarn requirements needed and all of that. So yeah, I guess that's just another sweater that I have plans to cast on very soon here. And I feel like I'm just going to put myself into a position of where I was last fall when I cast on a ton of sweaters at once, and then they all kind of languished for months. And it's just this vicious cycle. But I really, truly am excited for all of the projects that I'm knitting, of course, because why else would I be knitting them? But yeah, a lot of plans. And I have one more that I'm going to show you. So a couple years ago, I knit the Soda Basque shawl by Elena Solier, which was in 52 Weeks of Shawls, which is a book that I have. And I realized it's my favorite shawl, my go-to shawl. I wear it at least once a week, if not 2 times a week. And I wear it way more than the other shawls that I have knit. And I think there's a few reasons for that. A, it's a solid color and it's in like a muted brown. So it's really easy to pair with so many different things. And I also like the yarn content of it. I used Holst Garn Super Soft. And yeah, I just really like the way that yarn feels. It's very like a hardy yarn. And since a shawl is kind of worn on the outside, I don't need it to be next to skin soft. It's more like a guard against the elements. And the other reason why I really like that shawl is the shape of it. It's not like a perfect triangle shawl. It's a little bit off center, and it kind of makes it easier to wrap around. And so with all that being said, I wanted to make something somewhat similar again. And so when I was at the yarnery one of the times with Elena, I also ended up buying this cone of yarn. And it's the same yarn that I used for that Soda Bosk shawl, just in a different color. And this thing was only like $45. It knit a giant shawl, and I held the yarn double to knit a giant shawl, and I still have quite a bit left over. And so that's why I ended up purchasing it again. And the colorway of this one is maize. So I wanted to stick with a neutral color that I thought would look good with a lot of items. And all of the shawls that I have leaned more towards dark tones. So I wanted to make a lighter colored shawl. I have since started posting a little bit on Rednote, which is a social media app based in China, and I've been getting a ton of inspiration on there. I think it's interesting to see what people are knitting outside of like the North American European market. It kind of gives me a different perspective on patterns. But I've been seeing a lot of a shawl that is in 52 Weeks of Shawls by Lane, and it is the Quicksand Shawl by Hannah Makajuska. It's this beautiful, lacy, somewhat cable-y knit shawl in the same shape that I really liked the Soda Bosk shawl in. And I just thought the pattern would pair very beautifully with this particular yarn. And so that's what I'm planning on casting on with this. And I'm really looking forward to it. I think I'm going to really like the process of knitting that particular shawl. It just looks really unique in way the pattern is, and yeah, I'm just really excited to knit that one. As you can see, I have a lot on my plate and I have a lot that I'm about to cast on, but I'm really looking forward to it all. And it was really nice to sit down and talk about it, because there's something about putting those intentions out into the world. It kind of helps me hold myself accountable to stay on track with all of these projects that I have planned. I hope that you are immersing yourself into knitting or whatever craft that suits you, and are trying to, find happiness in this crazy world we're living in right now. I know that knitting in the knitting community has been a nice escape for as much as I can escape, and yeah, I hope to continue to have this peaceful space for all of us. Like I said, I am going on a trip next weekend with my neighbor and her friends up to Grand Marais. We rented a beautiful home right on Lake Superior, and by the time you're watching this, I'll be up there already, and I do plan to maybe film a little vlog while I'm up there, and then I can show you it the following week. And yeah, I'm super excited. I think there will be snow to go skiing, so I am planning on bringing my skis up, but other than that, I'm going to be doing a lot of knitting while I'm up there. Yeah, if you are liking these knitting podcasts from me, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, welcome. Please consider subscribing and you won't miss out on any future content. And in the meantime, I hope you have a good weekend and we will chat next time. Bye!